Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting to order of the City of West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency at 3:01 p.m. Reminder of our civility and decorum. Displays of anger, rudeness, ridicule, impatience, lack of respect, and personal attacks are strictly prohibited. We will move first to comments from the public for non-agenda items. And
there is none, Mr. President.
Thank you. Then we will move to comments from the commissioners. And we will start with Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. No comments.
Commissioner Shove.
Thank you. No comments today.
Commissioner Warren.
Thank you. No comments.
Mr. Ruger, are there any additions, deletions, or reorganization of the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Then we will move on to item 6 on the agenda, the consent calendar. It looks like we have 2 items on consent. Do we have any cards or comment cards in the portal? Commissioners comfortable with the consent calendar? Don't want to remove anything? Perfect. Then I will entertain a motion.
I just had a question.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. Just a comment really on 6.1, and I'll make this in the companion item in the commission meeting as well, but just would like a, of course, pending this approval, would like an update on this project, maybe at a commission work session forthcoming.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Warren.
Yes, I would like to know about the community benefits agreement associated with item 6.1.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. The community benefits agreement that is associated with this project, I don't have that information readily available. I do know that there was one that was put together, so I can have an update or a copy of it and an update as far as where we're at with the overall benefits and get that to the commission or to the CRA board this week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rugg. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Now we will entertain a motion.
I move approve consent.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If no other discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Okay, let's move on to 7 resolutions. Item 7.1, resolution number 21-62, approving the scope for the One Narrative Strategic Planning Project, and resolution number 21-64F, appropriating funds in the amount of $65,000 for the One Narrative Strategic Planning Project. Mr. Rugg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gina Baker is going to run my presentation here. So before I get into the finer points of the planning effort, this was, there's a lot that's happening in 3 communities in our city: Pleasant City, Coleman Park, and the historic Northwest. And there, in addition to that, there's a lot of resources that are, want to be applied to these areas. And so this effort was really sort of generated out of a need to understand how all of these different projects in these communities are going to be tied together, and how we can better guide those resources in the philanthropic community to deploy those resources in Coleman Park, Pleasant City, and the historic Northwest. So, Gina? So I'll just go over a brief overview of the study area, just so everybody's familiar with what we're proposing tonight. We have worked on a scope of work, and I say we. That's a collective of myself, some folks from the philanthropic community, folks from the West Palm Beach Center for Arts and Technology, as well as representatives from the historic neighborhood, namely Roosevelt Historic High School. And then we have developed a budget and a schedule that we're also going to have you consider tonight, and then happy to take any questions about this project. So looking at the study area, this is the historic Northwest, Coleman Park, and the Pleasant City area. So if we draw out the roads that go through this area, just to get reference, Banyan to the right side of the screen, this is looking east, 25th on the left side, which is the north end, US 1 running across. The top is the eastern road. And then you have Coleman Park, Pleasant City right next to it, just bifurcated by the railroad, and then just to the south is the historic Northwest. These three squares represent the proposed study area that the one narrative strategic plan would look at. Within these three areas, these three neighborhoods, which are all sort of viewed as one neighborhood, in my experience in being with the CRA, there's a variety of assets and things that are important to the community. And what has been requested is really just how are all of these things connected? We have so many great projects and so many initiatives and things that are places that are important to the community. There really is this desire of how these are collectively looked at in a holistic manner. And that's essentially the purpose of this study. Next. So when we looked at the scope of work, we looked at namely, we want to do an assessment of the past studies. There's been a lot of work that has been done over these three communities over the last 20, 30 years. And so we're going to look at what's occurred in those studies, what has been completed, and then also develop some strategic recommendations. And that includes looking at who we're going to talk to, the different types of groups of people involved, the assets that are in these neighborhoods, and then also getting into the data to understand what's happening from a quantitative perspective. Next. And also in the scope of work, there's specific selection criteria and qualifications that we're looking for as it relates to the firm that will conduct these. So this is just an idea on the left side of the different things that we will essentially be assessing when looking for the firm. And then we're going to ask those firms to describe what their experiences are with services in strategic planning, all the way down to how well do they actually know these communities, so that we get the right information and the right study at the end of the day. Next. So the overall project budget we've estimated to be about $65,000, and that would include their fee, any travel and expenses that they would need, and then also anticipating that this will require a robust community outreach effort, planning some dollars associated with there. And it's important to note that this budget, when I looked at what was approved this past September, that in both CRA areas, we have this other category that really can apply dollars throughout the different CRA districts. And so the proposal is that we essentially take the fee half from the Pleasant City Northwood CRA budget and then half from the downtown city center budget, although the downtown city center budget would pick up about $1,000 more just because it's a larger fund, and split the cost between the two CRAs in order to fund the holistic planning effort. And that would come out of a professional services line item that had enough money to cover both of those costs, just to give you the full picture on where the budget was developed and the different line items that we'll be pulling from. And if approved tonight, we would kick off this planning effort with procuring the firm and having them selected by March. So I would start working with them here shortly, with the idea that shortly thereafter they begin work and have hopefully the work completed, but at least pretty close to completion by the end of the third quarter of next year. I also thought it was, Gina, if you could go back, sorry. I also thought it was really interesting. I found this image when I did, one more. No, you're going the wrong way, Gina.
Sorry, I killed your whole deal there.
So this, I found this image that, we had in 1968, the state champion basketball team actually came out of Roosevelt High School, which I thought it was a kind of a neat historical image. I'm sorry, it's a little pixelated, but it is kind of neat. But it sort of signals the importance of things, because that was actually at that historic Roosevelt High School, which is part of the scope area. And it's also important to note that I did get a letter from the school district that they are committed to improving that historic high school. So that that letter is in hand, so you can rest assured that the school district is on board with working with RISE to improve that historic high school. Next. So with that, this is one of the few projects that actually includes both city commission districts, but it also both CRA districts. When I brought this to the CRA advisory board, it did receive unanimous support. It was actually talked about at a couple of CRA meetings, or CRA advisory board meetings. And then next, Gina. I also do want to note the folks that helped me with the scope of work. It was not done in a vacuum. We spent quite a bit going around on the different things that needed to be included, the type of firm that we're looking for. So this was developed with these key folks involved, and as you can see, it includes Eric Kelly from the Quantum Foundation. He was really one of the big leaders on it, really representing that philanthropic community, but as well as Carlos, Rachel, Miss Perry, and former Mayor Moyo. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Rugg. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Shove.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. This is a really exciting project, because while our CRA district have bounds, our communities do not. And so when it comes to areas like Coleman Park that's not within the CRA, they don't have issues that are unique that, you know, Pleasant City and the historic Northwest don't have as well. They do on some of their hot button issues, but mostly there's common themes that I think we can help to address. So, and Mr. Rugg, I appreciate you reaching out, and I know I've provided the various Lambert commissions, the Stull and Lee report, and the various reports that have been done in the community. So I think it's really important as we go through this process that we have a plan to really engage the neighbors. So I think we need someone here to lead that process, but maybe we're not there yet. Do we have a plan that tells us how we're going to engage the neighbors, the people that actually live in the community?
That would be the next step. Once we actually identify the firm, we would ask them to put forth those different processes and schedule and how many meetings they plan to have. But so we're not quite there yet. This is just simply for the procurement effort to say, do you want to move forward with the project? And then once we, if you approve the project tonight, then we'll begin identifying that firm. And then in that scope, we can say if there's a specific amount of meetings that you would like to occur in each individual neighborhood, we can make sure that that's reflected in the request for proposals. We don't have that level of detail yet right now, but it would involve a very robust community engagement, because that's essentially where most of the information is going to come from in order to understand how the community would like to see the different assets connected.
And when we're doing this procurement process, is this limited to local firms? Is it a national call? How are we procuring?
I mean, my preference would not be to limit it to local firms. I think what's important is that we get the right firm that has experience in working in communities, primarily that are in redevelopment agency areas, and that have similar assets and historical, assets that have historical value and things like that. So I think it's making sure that we just find the right firm, and I wouldn't want to pigeonhole us into a specific locality, but it's the pleasure of the board.
Thank you, and I think this effort is extremely important. The things that I would like to see as we go forward, if it's the will of this board to go forward, are that definitive community engagement plan, so we make sure that we are engaging people within the community, and what is the action plan going out of this exercise, because as I've indicated, I appreciate that. I know we're going to look at some of the historical things that have been done, but some of the issues are, when I look at the Stull and Lee report, with the exception of some just as of late updates with the Grand and some other big projects, the requests are relatively the same. Everything's looked the same for the last, I can't count how many years. So you know, if we're going to engage neighbors and we're going to really put an effort into this, I think we owe it to them to say, what are the actionable steps out the other side, and how is this time different from the last times that we've been engaged? But thank you for bringing it forward.
And some of the, you know, having looked through some of those studies, there are some things that we are pursuing that are in those plans, and there's things that are not. And I think it's kind of, you know, taking them all, being you know, looking at them holistically and saying, okay, you know, are there things that we want to continue or maybe shift away from? But I think the idea is that from an operational standpoint, how are they all going to work together? And then also each one of them has like the West Palm Beach Center for Arts and Technology and the historic Roosevelt High School and the Styx Promenade. I mean, all of them may have, well, some of them will have capital campaigns that they're going to ask the philanthropic community for or other folks in order to raise money. So, we have found that a lot of people are going to the same sources for different resources or different projects. So it's about making sure that it's all sort of looked at in a holistic manner. And so far, everybody is on board with saying, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, so that there isn't this cannibalization of resources and everybody sort of pitting one project over another. It's looked at collectively.
Thank you.
Commissioner Warren.
Great job. This is very comprehensive. If you can go back to the slide that shows the participants, the people that have been contributing to this, it's a dynamic group of very well respected and engaged people with Eric Kelly, Cora Perry, just to name a few. I don't see on here, and I know that you made reference, but I would like to know more detail to what level has the school district been involved in this, and what does that support from the school district look like?
So in the drafting of the scope, they have not been part of the conversation, but that was always something that I don't know that it was really required because it's a CRA effort. The one thing that I think everybody, including the mayor, even though he's not here, had requested was that a commitment from that they will participate with us when we are ready to kick off the actual planning. And that was namely through understanding how what their plans are with Roosevelt High School. And knowing now that they are committed to the improvement and the change and the modernization of the Roosevelt Historic High School and that preservation and activating that in coordination with RISE, they will be, I feel confident that they will be a participant in this planning effort, and they will be included as part of the outreach and planning process. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rugg. I'm grateful to see this come forward because I know many times we're talking about projects in each of these different areas. We're often talking about making sure that there is connection between these communities, these neighborhoods, these streets. One of the things that you did as Economic Development Director that I always appreciated was whenever you were presenting a new idea, a new project, you always tied it back to the Economic Development Plan. Mm-hmm. And so I look forward to that continued practice here with the CRA, because I do think that we can, take a lot of great time and great information and community input, but it's only as valuable as it is when it's implemented and followed up upon. And so I don't know if this was in the scope. Oftentimes you create the strategic plan and then it's handed to the organization to implement, but I would like to make sure that in these discussions we're also talking about what are our safety nets, what are our strategies for helping make sure that these things get implemented, get followed up on, or discussed as we move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Rugg?
Just couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner. And just to add to that, there was actually a method to the timing of the plan in that what I'm hoping for is by wrapping up the plan third quarter of next year, that is perfect timing for budgeting. And then what we can do is my guess is that there will be action items coming out of it that we can then build into the budget for the next fiscal year, and hopefully hit the ground running shortly thereafter with exactly what you're talking about. So we go right into execution right after planning.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then it doesn't appear that we have any comment cards from the public on this matter. So if we don't have any more discussion, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve resolution number 21-62 and resolution number 21-64F.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If no more discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 7.2, resolution number 21-63, approving the revised concept plan for the tent site development by Coen Brothers Realty Corporation, LLC. Mr. Ruge.
Thank you, Commissioners. I know there has been quite a bit of discussion, and we have Mr. Seymour with us. Brian, hey Brian. As well as I see Rick and Anna's from our planning department here with us today. But today is, per a letter that was sent out, is a review of the revised concept plan. You want to just go to the next slide, Gina? Thank you. So I'm just going to go over a very brief overview to give you a snapshot of how we got to this point. We do have a ground lease, and in the ground lease there are specific elements that are included in that conceptual review. So I'll just talk a little bit about those as well. And then without getting into too much of the weeds or stealing Brian's thunder, I'll allow him to bring back the revised concept plan for the West Palm Point project to go over some of the details of what has changed with it, and then ultimately questions and discussions from you all and the direction of how you would like to move forward with this project. Gina? So just so everybody is clear on where the tent site is located, between Dixie Highway, Quadro Boulevard, Lake Avenue, and Okeechobee Boulevard is essentially the tent site relies right in the middle, and it's surrounded by a variety of other assets. The main ones, Woodlawn Cemetery, which is just to the south because we're looking east. You have Rosemary Square to the northwest. The Community Foundation, which is kind of a nice little gem. And then, of course, Palm Beach Atlantic University up to the southeast of the parcel. So right smack dab in the middle of all of this is the tent site. And it is quite a popular site when it comes to just development opportunity. So you can see it's all in between all of these very important assets. Next. So as and these timelines are not, this just gives you sort of the CRAs, the things that are applicable to the CRA. There's obviously a lot of other things that have occurred during this time frame. But April 21st of 2020, we did sign the ground lease, and that set in motion a series of steps that Brian and Charles then began moving and having to meet, mainly dealing with the concept plan and then also a series of other things. I did receive the images of the revised project, the revised concept, on October 5th, and between that time and October 18th, it was determined that those were material changes that needed to come back for this board for review and consideration. And that brings us to today to look at the revised concept plan. Next. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the ground lease for the tent site, it specifies very clearly in there what's included in the concept plan review. So these are a variety of different elements that need to be considered when we look at the revised drawings and consideration, namely on the parking garage. And these are, while you're looking at and considering it, these are the different areas where you can adjust, modify, or give some direction on to Brian and Mr. Coen as it relates to the project. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Seymour.
Mr. Seymour.
tall, but I'm not that tall. For the record, Brian Seymour on behalf of Coen Brothers Realty Corporation of Florida, the lessee. I'm not going to get into a big legal argument, but since we have to show up, I want to make clear we don't think we actually have to show up. We're here because y'all sent the letter. We do not agree that these are material changes. I've had conversations with Ms. Rosenberg. We'd rather work this out. We don't want to fight about this. So we're here. We're going to try to work through this, and I do want to talk about what we're here for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits for the city. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lease history and the approval process so that we can talk about how we got here. As Chris mentioned, the lease was entered into in April of 2020, which was over a year and a half ago now, after a selection process where you all heard from other folks other than Mr. Coen, based on his history, based on what he's done, based on the iconic work that he has produced throughout this country. You all chose him. As part of that lease, you also, as I've said, included a requirement that Pelley Clark Pelley Architects be the architect of record for this project, the design architect for this project. And they are the design architect for this project. Everything you see and have seen is the architect that you all chose as part of this process, along with Mr. Coen having been chosen as well. So we're here after decades, really, right? This site has been vacant for, well, I've been here for 25 years. There's been stops and starts. I saw that the most recent use 2 weekends ago was for people doing donuts on the site in the middle of the night. I don't know if y'all saw that on Engage. It's literally one of the only 2 reasons I'm on Facebook is I go watch Engage. It's always a fascinating thing. So that's the most recent use of the site. But after you've selected Mr. Coen, you entered into that lease, and there are some serious commitments that Mr. Coen made to the city. This is not someone who's coming and saying, give me. This is someone who's saying, partner with me, who work with me, and he's provided a significant number of benefits to the city. So these numbers are right from the lease on percentages based on a rough $100 million cost of construction. And it's actually probably more than that, particularly with the revisions that have been made. But I'm not great at math, so I used 100 as a basis for this. But some of those commitments that he made to this city that we want to make sure happen here are over $5 million that would go to minority and women businesses. We'd have over $10 million of local workforce, $5 million to disabled veterans, and $15 million to small businesses. Those are all directly from the lease. Those are commitments he made in writing. They're not asking, it's not, hey, promises will be made later. He put it in writing, he put his name on it, and he put it into this contract. There's also a lot of benefit ultimately to this city from this site, in addition to just the property taxes. I think you've got a little over 2.2 millage rate. So with $100 million of improvements, that certainly would be well over $2 million in taxes, as well as $1 million approximately in rental payments, not to mention hundreds of millions of dollars in ultimate economic impact throughout the city. And I mention that in part because, as I'm going to talk about in a second, I was at a meeting last week with the Downtown Neighborhood Association, and someone asked me about that. They said, well, what's the impact to this city? And so I wanted to make sure that we all remember what some of the impact to the city is, and again, the commitments that Mr. Coen has made in writing in this contract. So as Chris mentioned, we presented the concept plan in August of 2020. That was unanimously approved. There were questions, nothing that said go back and restructure, rechange, do something completely different. And I went back and actually looked at the transcript. We pulled the video and looked at it and said, what was discussed? And were we told to go back and revision this entire garage? And we were not. There was one comment about it looking like a garage. The Commissioner Shove has been consistent about that throughout. But otherwise, it was really about, Commissioner Lambert talked a little bit about, how is it not going to be unattractive? And we walked through that. We talked about it. We talked about the art at the time and all the things that went into it. But ultimately, we kept to that plan. Talked a little bit about the public areas, which were important and kept. Everybody talked about the public area, the paseo, making sure we kept all of that. The design of the building, Commissioner Peduzzi didn't like the rendering of that building. I think you called it the silver bullet. Fixed through the 3D renderings that got a lot more detail to it so that we got past some of that. Again, all those questions were asked, we explained, and then we got a unanimous vote, and that was our directive. So I have heard people say, you didn't listen to us. I want to be clear that we really did. The key takeaways there were that visual impact, particularly from the ground level. What is it going to look like for people on the street? And we took that into accommodation and we took that into account, keeping the concept plan as it was because we had to. If I had done a wholesale revision of that, we would have, if we had been told that's what we needed to do, we would have been back here a year ago. But we focused on those issues. We extended the design of the slabs, we tilted them upward, we extended them out so that they can be blocked. Again, thinking about what it would look like from the street level, changed a little bit of the roof garden area, kept the core of the concept, created some articulation, did a few other things with it, and did try to keep it as close as possible to what this board unanimously approved for the site. So not significant changes, but focused on the things that were raised that we could deal with. So when we got to City Commission in September, we had a staff recommendation of denial on 6 of the proposed waivers. We disagreed with that. We thought we met all of the requirements of that, and we showed that. Ultimately, after hearing the staff presentation, hearing our presentation as to why we thought we met those regulations, City Commission said, we don't like those waivers. We don't want to approve those waivers. So either I had to come back with active use liner, or I had to come back with a living green wall. And those are the 2 options to get rid of those waivers. Any other type of screening, any other structure, anything else would have required those waivers to be there. And again, went back and looked at the discussions that were had. It was really focused on those waivers and seeing the cars. There was, even though we thought we showed you couldn't see the cars from the ground floor, that concern existed, it remained. So we went back and we looked at a redesign. Again, we didn't just put screening on the side. That doesn't do what we were told by the regulators, you as the regulators, to do, which is meet the code on this active use line or green wall provision. And so we didn't also just slap anything together. It took a couple of weeks to redesign and work through this on this. And I have if you want to see them again, but ultimately we did those what are called base studies. We looked at what the mass of the garage would look like, what would happen. We showed them at the last City Commission meeting. I think that you all have seen that or have had the opportunity to see that. If you want me to, I can certainly walk through all of that again, about the height of the garage, the mass, what the code requires, and ultimately what we came up with is the change that you're now talking about tonight, and I know you've all seen it as well, which is the regulatory requirement, still creative, still innovative, looking at different things, and goes beyond actually what the code would require, which was only 60% of the first 5 floors, 68 feet, would have to be dealt with in either the green or the active use liner, and we went beyond that. We didn't just turn it around and put some green. It was truly designed. It was designed by the architect at Pelley Clark Pelley Architects to meet the code and still provide something unique and special in the city. So you've all seen it. I have the pictures if you want to see them again. But there's a few things to note. There's no change to the building. There's no change to the paseo. There's no change to the access. And there's very little actual change to the structure of the parking structure itself. It's exactly the same height, which was important because we didn't want to just go up and create more mass. That was something that creates a problem. The ground floor is exactly the same. The floor plates for floors 2 through 10, we did an analysis looking at the numbers. They average about a 3-foot setback differential on average as you go through that, with the top floors being further set back because we wanted to decrease that mass too. And if you recall at the last City Commission meeting, when we talked about this, we set those back so as you look up, you don't just see another wall coming up. It was designed specifically to pull back a little bit. Again, meeting some of those setback requirements that you wanted us to try to meet, and also to decrease the mass of the garage itself. Total parking is the same, total floor area is the same, the square footage is the same. Really, it was just about how do we have to meet the code? How can we do that? And what we did is, instead of the slabs coming out and then turning up, they go up, and then we put a green wall on it per the code. So that's what we did. It will create one of the largest, if not the largest, we did some looking, living green walls in the United States. It was designed with the landscape architect. We talked to several installers, maintenance people. We looked at this in detail to make sure that it can work. And so here we are, as we were looking at climate change, we're looking at sea level rise. We added a little added value on the extra green. We're going to put a cistern so that we can collect some rainwater, so that we have some, these things that came out of that piece of that redesign, so that we added some more environmentally sensitive design to this as well. So that's me in front of a group, right? That was last week. So we had heard neighbors, I don't know who, but the neighbors had some concerns potentially, or they hadn't been reached out. And I want to thank Commissioner Fox, and I want to thank Cynthia from the Downtown Neighborhood Association for continuing to reach out and make sure that we were talking to the DNA. That's from the DNA meeting last week. Prior to that, we had reached out to City Place South Tower Condo Association. We met with them. They had no issues. We reached out to One City Plaza and Two City Plaza. They had no issues such that they didn't even want to meet. And then last week we did meet, and that's a picture from the DNA meeting. And it was a bit of an odd experience for me, I must tell you, as a developer's lawyer. Normally when I have community meetings, there's a lot of questions, a lot of issues, and some sneering. I've had one lady shake her cane at me. This meeting was dramatically different. Now, there's over 50 people there. Cynthia told me that she had over 75 RSVPs. I don't know if there were 75 people there. There were questions. There were a couple traffic questions. Nobody had an issue with the look of the garage, the building, or anything else. And what happened at the end of that was a little bit jarring for me, to be completely frank, is that we got a round of applause. And people asked me afterwards, what can we do to help make this happen? Now, some of them said they wanted to be here. I will tell you, I told them 4 o'clock, because it wasn't until this morning that I found out that this was going to be 3 o'clock. I did text Cynthia. She had moved the meeting from 4 to 3, so she's going to try to be here by 4. So if you want to hear from some of those folks, and certainly from Cynthia, who's the president of the DNA, she can talk about that as well. Commissioner Warren and Commissioner Fox were both there. I'm not lying. They literally applauded. We have done everything we can. We worked with our neighbors. We've reached out. We've worked with the staff. We've worked with you. We've been at this for a long time. We've been answering questions throughout this. We've redesigned to meet the regulatory requirement that was at issue. We've met and have broad support from the community. And so after decades of this site being vacant, all we ask is that we be allowed to move forward now with this project, and hopefully we can get your approval tonight. We don't have to argue about that. And then the meeting later tonight, move forward, and we can start getting the final design drawings, all the details done with the construction drawings that come next, and start moving this project forward, and all those benefits that we want to provide the city and that Mr. Coen has committed to will start being a reality. I'm happy to answer any questions. My phone is in my pocket, so Kristen is watching. Charles is watching, so he had knee surgery, so couldn't be here, but happy to answer questions that you all have.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. And Mr. Rugg, do you have anything to add, or should I go to commissioners' questions and comments?
I have nothing to add, Commissioner.
Commissioners? Questions, comments? Commissioner Shove.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. You know, I know that we've been working on this issue for quite some time, and there's no doubt in my mind that the benefits that a development on this site, that any development would bring are very welcome. The things that we have written into this lease and we have agreed to. So being this is such a long process, I had gone back to the meeting on August 10th, 2020, and there were some things that stood out to me during that meeting. The meeting started off, and it was very clear that this was not a full development plan, that this was not as detailed as we were going to get down the line. And so as I reviewed that meeting, I also heard concerns from 3 commissioners, myself being one of them, specifically about the parking garage. And I have been 100% consistent in this throughout time. When we looked at the parking garage, I asked several times about looking at the treatment of the parking garage and how we could make it not look like a parking garage. And the concept plan in the process of this approval is so that we can get to the place where there can be more detail. So, you know, the place where we've arrived today, could I have done things differently back on the 10th? Yes, we could have not approved this plan, said bring back exactly what is going to be presented, and further delayed the process. And I think in the spirit of wanting to be good partners in this is a public-private partnership, we move that forward. But looking at the very end of that meeting, I specifically said during that meeting, is there a way we can make this parking garage look better? Is there a way we can make this not look like a parking garage? And Mr. Coen himself said at the end of that meeting, we will do everything we can to make it look the best we can. And so from that time to the time where we got to regulatories, not much had changed about that actual parking garage. Again, could I have done it differently on the 10th and said, we're not moving things forward until we get to that place? Absolutely. But then we brought forward for the regulatory plan. And looking at the concept plan that we have today, well, I guess let me back up. So we looked at the regulatory plan. There was a discussion about the parking garage again, and active use liners, making the parking garage not look like a parking garage, and getting something that is fitting for the middle of Okeechobee Boulevard. So the parking garage then was changed to check the box to meet code. And there were significant changes, as Mr. Rugg had his slide up on the things that we're considering for the concept plan. The facade treatment was changed, the landscaping is changed, and it changes the entire narrative. So as far as material changes to the plan, I would argue there's been some very significant material changes to the plan, but not one that I, as the property owner, feel like are in the spirit of what that first discussion had been. So, I mean, I'm 1/6 of this dais. And so looking at where we were in the discussion to where we are today, I don't feel like it was in the spirit of working together in that partnership that we're trying to get to today.
So I understand, Commissioner, and you may recall as well that my response to you was, you can't make a garage not look like a garage. And when Mr. Coen said we're going to do everything we can to make it look as good as we can, he did do that, and we did do that. But no direction was given from the commission as a whole, change this so it looks dramatically different. And so we didn't, because we would have had to start over. I took that vote as exactly what it was. And so if there's a feeling that we sort of blew off the discussion points, please know that is exactly the opposite of what happened. We tried to get there, and yes, when we got the more detail, and we changed it, right? The slab changed, we did some things to try to hide things, changed the art a little bit in the way it would have to get painted on, some things, and it didn't get there enough for the regulation. It didn't meet the regulation. And so we also didn't just go back and just throw something together then either. We looked at active use liner, and then we walked through why that didn't make sense. And if we followed the regs specifically, it would have been far less than what you see now, because you wouldn't have to have that. And as a property owner, that would have done exactly the opposite of what you asked us as a whole at that meeting, which is to hide the cars, to make it look good. I cannot make this not look like a parking garage. I gotta have entrances, I have to have pieces. If you want it to be a building, I would have needed to know. We've spent $1 million plus on design, on going through, and the partnership is about working together for sure. And we've tried to do that. We tried to stay within that concept, and when that didn't go, we came back and we worked. And it's not just another rounded edge garage either. We put in some of the indentations. You've got the different coloring schemes. You've got the pieces that come together to tie it together. This was really trying to meet what the overall issue was. Again, you have been absolutely consistent. Make it not look like a parking garage. We can't figure out exactly how to do that. So we did the best we could within the concept and then within the regulation.
I guess to the point of not making it look like a parking garage, we've pointed out several examples in this city where you can make a parking garage not look like a parking garage. So I understand those sites are different than the site that we have today, but as we looked at what the spirit was, again, back from August the 10th, 2020 to now, looking at the parking garage that was proposed, I understand it wouldn't meet code, and now we changed that parking garage to meet code, but it shouldn't be just about checking the box, that we should take one concept to check the box and meet code. Is that the best way to meet those requirements? Because there are several ways that that could get done.
We can only follow the direction we're given, Commissioner, and we did the best we could. And we didn't just check the box. We didn't just check the box. That's not fair.
So I guess what I'm saying is I have been consistent from the beginning of time about what it was, the expectation that I had thought we were going down the line. And so, you know, understandably, you're in a different position. This is a partnership, and I want it to be a partnership. And I'm speaking from the place of being the landowner in this. And what has been submitted from concept plan, even if we just take the pure concept plan that was approved by this body, you're 100% right in that. There have been significant material changes to that plan as outlined that I don't feel comfortable with as the owner. So, Mr. President, I'm sorry for taking more than my due time.
Thank you, Commissioner Shove. Commissioners, any other questions or comments for Mr. Seymour? Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. City Attorney, I haven't had a chance to follow up with you. Will you be weighing in on the argument that these are substantial changes or not?
The CRA has already sent a letter that it indicated that it believed that the changes that were made were material changes.
I couldn't hear you. Wait, can you?
Sorry. The CRA has already sent a letter saying that it believed that the changes were material changes that required them, the applicant or the Coen team, to come back and bring it to the CRA board. Brian has indicated to you that he disagrees. That's where we are with that.
But we are here.
But we're here.
But we're here.
And they did say, in the spirit of I think we received a letter or something, in the spirit of cooperation, that they would come and be here today to present to you the proposed concept plan with the living green walls.
Again, Commissioner, as I said to start, we don't want to argue about this. We don't want to fight about this. We want to get this thing built.
And I appreciate that too. And I appreciate you pointing out the economic commitments that the developer has made to the city. Those are substantial. Equally substantial is this project to the city. And I think we all just want to make sure that we get it right. And, you know, since we've been having this discussion more and more about the garage, I've been looking at more and more garages throughout the city, and you know, I have to agree with Commissioner Shove. I do think that there are examples throughout our city of where garages don't necessarily look like garages at first glance. Of course, there's an opening to the garage where you go in, and I understand that. I guess what I would like to see is just, you know, a focus on the pedestrian who's walking by this garage and making sure that, you know, we're looking at it from their perspective.
And we have, and everything's been about that, right? So that's why you have it so that it's scaled back. That's why you have the green going all the way up. That's why you have the design with the what are planar brakes, right? The garage brakes, it doesn't just go flat out. It was all part of that concept, which is what we showed to the neighbors in the neighborhood, all of whom appreciated that. Those garages that you're talking about are integrated garages. They're all boxes at the bottom with a building on top, which means they integrate all of their MEP, their mechanical, electrical, plumbing. They've got all their pieces in there. It isn't an apples to apples comparison in that. This is a separated piece. To meet what you all have and what you all wanted, the tower and the Paseo particularly, we can't do that. What you would have is a big, massive box, no public spaces, no innovation of the design sitting on Okeechobee. And so what we did is the focal point being the building, and then tying things in and going above and beyond to try to make things work within everything. But I can't, if you clad it, one, I can't meet the code, and two, you don't have what you have in some of those other examples, or at first look, it may not look like a garage. And so that's what we were trying to avoid. If you all tell me clad the sides and show us what it would look like, I'm going to have to decide, do we do that, or do we fight about whether this was even appropriate? Mr. Coen and I will talk about that. He wants to get this done. I can only tell you that This would be the first time in all of the discussions that have been had that that ever came up. And that's a little frustrating for us, too.
Follow-up, Commissioner Lambert?
Can you just clarify what you said, that this would be the first time that whatever came up?
About putting just cladding on the garage. We've heard from Commissioner Schoaf, make it not look like a garage. But cladding the sides, putting screening on as opposed to meeting the code, or as opposed to trying to keep the concept that was there, where it was an open airy concept with the artwork integrated into it, all of that part was all previous. So if what was wanted was screening, we could have looked at that from the start. It's a very difficult thing. You have lots of other issues that come. Every time you put something on the outside, you decrease your airflow. You have to look at now whether you have to put in vents and ducts, different things. Does it create a higher garage? All of that goes into that design element, which is what we were trying to avoid. Do you have to take pieces off? Do you have to move some spaces around? Do whatever. We've tried to avoid all of those things. Will create more mass on the site as well. And so that's how all of these came about.
So when you're talking about more mass, that leads me to the thought process about the size of this garage. And I know that you all are asking for the maximum number of spots in the garage. And so when we're talking about all of the variables, I think that that's something that should play into the discussion as well.
It did, Commissioner, and you asked about it specifically at the concept plan approval. This building does not work without parking. We've had the discussion a couple of times here as well, but at the end of the day, the tenants that are going to pay what it's going to pay to be here, to build a building like this, to create something like this, we're not sitting right next to the Tri-Rail station. We're not sitting right next to the Brightline station. We're not in the heart of downtown. We're at the edge of the downtown. And so people do need to park. And we do have the ability to convert in the future if people don't want to park in the future. But in order to make this a viable project, again, over $100 million being put into this, of Mr. Coen's money, his mortgages, his name, they need the parking. It has to work. You got to get the financing done. You've got to show the marketability of it. You've got to show that it works. If we don't have the parking, it doesn't work. That's the tenant demand issue that we have.
And then one other follow-up, just to your comment about, had we said earlier we wanted screens, I don't think any of us, portray to be an architect by any means or designers, and you certainly have a world-renowned architect on here on your team. And so I think we're just looking to, see that design come from this team. And I also went back and watched the video from August and watched the discussion that, we'd like this to not look like a garage. And I saw the promises back that, it's going to look like the best garage. And I guess it just now comes down to different points of view about what the best garage looks like.
Well, if it's hard for us to know then what the answer is if we have to keep coming back with different alternatives and come back and go back and come back and go back. And then we have to go to the regulator. The regulator didn't want to give us the waivers that we needed. And how do we end this discussion point? How do we know that we have anything?
Well, I do not want to argue with a paid and trained litigator, but I do know that part of that process is working with staff and coming up with something that
they can support.
They can support.
Which we have, and they did. And staff recommended approval at the city commission meeting last time when we were before you. So the waivers were gone. The things they were concerned about were dealt with.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions? Commissioner Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. I've had the opportunity to go back and look at additional information as well. And I do believe that what I heard consistently was a concern about the structure looking like a parking garage, which it still does look like a parking garage. I do believe that this project in and of itself is wonderful because I support diversification and development. I support this amazing building going up. I support the economic impact that this will have on our community. I think there are a lot of attributes, positive things. The contribution to the MWBE program, there's so many really, really good things that come from this. But then there are some things that I've heard consistently for over a year as it relates to this. I do not know, when I look at this structure and I see a garage with green space, it concerns me that that would be a lot of other garages with green space that come to our downtown when we've worked very hard to avoid structures that look like garages. In my experience with structures that look like garages, and I'll be specific, when I look at the garages that are on 3rd and Rosemary, they wall off an entire community. And now we're talking about our downtown and the walkability of our downtown and whether or not we're going to have things that are warm and inviting for people to get out of their car or as they're walking down the street that they feel that they are a part of a thriving area and that they're not walking past a garage. So my concern again is this the best fit for that space? And I don't know conclusively that the garage, the structure as it stands, is the best fit for what we've been working to achieve in our downtown. So
when you say walled off, Commissioner, that's exactly what we've been trying to avoid the whole time. From the ground plane, there is glass, by the 20 feet of glass for the retail spaces that go around. Of course, the glass of the whole tower is all glass. Street trees that end up blending into the green wall, so you end up having a feel of that. And so we're trying not to wall off. I mean, the idea of making it not look like a garage to look like more of a building would be more of a wall. So I'm not sure what I should try to look at if you're not okay with what we have. It's just, and this is the problem I'm trying to get. If you're gonna say no to this and we're gonna try to redesign, I need to know a little bit of what we're gonna do. Frankly, I gotta tell you, after everything we've been through, and literally one commissioner, has said make it not look like a garage. The rest were concept, but not that specific. So I don't believe that was a general, because if that was what happened at the concept plan, make it not look like a garage, and it never should have been approved, and we never should have spent this year, because we're now at the end of it. I have a month left to get the regulatory approval that I need or get a 6-month extension, and because we have spent almost a year in the development approval process. So if I'm going to try to get something, I need to know what it is. So, but I don't know how to not make it walled. I mean, it was much more open and airy, less walled in the original concept. And so what we've tried to do is incorporate different things, incorporate the greening, incorporate, a feel, just like you said, so it's not just a wall. And so if that wasn't it, is there something else that you think could be useful? Is it the screening that exists for the Parkline apartments, or something like that? I just don't know. Because I feel like that's more wall. And when we get into this subjective, it becomes very, very difficult. So I'm not trying to argue. I'm trying to understand.
And I don't believe that you're trying to argue, even though that's what you do for a living. I do not believe that that's what you're trying to do right now.
See me at home.
I do not have the answer. What I would say is that I would recommend that you look at different alternatives, because I'm not the expert in that area, but if I look at screens and visual screens that could appear to be something different, I don't have that level of expertise. However, I do know what is not working, and I know that doesn't offer you a whole lot to go on, but I know that this concept, the way that it has been presented, is not working, because it just doesn't fit with the progression and the direction of the downtown.
Thank you, Commissioner. Comments from Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, Brian, for coming to the Downtown Neighborhood Association last week. As you mentioned, I do appreciate that. I did hear a lot of great comments about the project. I am very excited about the project. I know many others are looking forward to having something wonderful in that space, and waited a long time to have a great partner. But I have also heard continued concerns about the garage, including my own. I look at the garage and I think it doesn't complement sort of the mobility planning that the city has been working on for years. And, just in terms of having more walkability and more user-friendly spaces. I think one of the things I would like to see, if we could revise the garage a bit, would be working a little bit more with the planning board or our planning staff to look at those goals, and maybe there would be more recommendations for the garage. I know that you have a world-class architect. I am certainly would never pretend to second guess what other concepts she might be able to come up with in terms of making the project also look a little more similar, that it doesn't look like two completely different projects is one thing that I have heard quite a lot of times. Just that the building and the garage look like they don't necessarily belong together. So I am very grateful that you all are continuing to work with us, and I hope that we can continue to do so and be good partners to you as well. But I think that we should look at working, making sure that the garage a little bit different, making it a little bit more usable as well. I love the idea that you have the valet on the second floor, for example, because it takes the traffic off of the street, and I think that was such a thoughtful design, as well as the Uber stations. But some of the other concepts, like if it's raining at City Hall and we have to walk out, there's no cover for us to walk. And I think about that all the time. Do people that are renting this high-end Class A office space want to walk from the garage when it's raining 50% of the time and there's no cover? A few things like that I know I've mentioned to you before, but I just think that it might be challenging if the architect maybe hasn't spent the time here to know that some of the ways that the area might be using the space. But anyway, so those are my thoughts, but thank you again for coming tonight and continuing to work with us.
So we have had that discussion. The architect has been here. The architect has spent time here. The architect does understand it rains here. And as we've discussed, there is cover. I've got a builder, a developer who's done this in iconic buildings around the country, who fits his environment, who works with his environment. He understands what his tenants' wants and needs are. The public space is a critical part of this, and it's been designed very specifically and very carefully. The mobility is very consistent, and as I presented at the City Commission meeting, we've utilized almost every single TDM in the code. We have over 300 bike parking spaces, including in secured videoed rooms, so that they're actually secured, so that people don't just come by and steal a seat, which I think happened to Mr. Rugg once. We've got micro mobility opportunities that we've talked about. We have double wide sidewalks. We have street trees. We have all of this. All the mobility is incorporated into it. The parking structure has nothing to do with any of that. It doesn't change any of that that's been there, and it's still incorporated, and it has been incorporated. I would be curious who it is you're talking to, because the only objector that I've heard about this is Mr. Morrison, who is across the street, who wants to build his own building and says we should all have to follow the rules. That was his direct quote, which we're doing. And so I'm curious, I'd like to talk to those folks about if they're the ones telling you don't approve this, or they have problems with it. I'd like to know who they are so I can talk to them and make sure, because none of them have talked to us. And we went to the DNA, and 50 plus people showed up, and they all liked it. They weren't concerned about the neighborhood look. They felt like it fit. They worked it. They were excited about it, and they wanted it to move forward. So if you can give me those names, I would like to talk to those folks.
Follow up, Commissioner Fox? I'll just say that, Mr. Seymour, I concur with the sentiments here of my colleagues. I like the tower. I really like the tower. I just can't wrap my head around the parking garage, but I'm not so sure that I'd ever like any parking garage that looks like a parking garage. Now, when it comes to the organic living, material that's going to be on the outside, I have a further concern with, we're a state that gets hurricanes. We occasionally get freezes. What's that gonna look like, after a storm, after a freeze, with that sheer amount of organic material? You have a small amount, you have a wall, I understand that can be replaced and fairly quickly after a storm. But that's just a further concern of mine with that sheer amount of organic material on the side of the building.
I understand, Commissioner. I can only tell you we've talked to numerous people. There will be full-time maintenance staff. We know that if there's an issue that it will have to be replaced. There's going to be a maintenance plan. It's all part of the requirements of everything that we're going to have to do. So it'll be there. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, we have experts, and that's what they do, and that's what they've told us. This will work in Florida. Here's where we are. So, you know, you can't make particularly a standalone parking structure not look like something of what it is. And so if what you want us to do is look at screening it, and you know, we're already increasing the cost, but if, you know, what we really don't want to do, unless you tell us we're fine with a 12 or 14 story structure, then we don't want to keep going up to make this work either. So if you know, I would like to understand at the very least, you know, the mass of the building that is designed there, right? The number of floors, the fact that we step it back, is that something that's useful? And then we can work on some of the screening to see if those screenings can work. Again, assuming that at the end of the day, that it will get past the regulation that we won't meet, that we were told to meet. I want to understand, y'all understand, if we do what we're talking about here, we cannot meet the regulation.
Thank you. Any further comments, Commissioner Shove?
Thank you very much. And Mr. Seymour, to your point of not meeting the regulation, and I think Commissioner Lambert touched upon this, none of us here on this dais are licensed architects. We might not be using the right language of screening or ground floor, you know, active wrap uses. What I hear consistently is, back to my first point, we're looking for a parking garage that doesn't look like a parking garage. I know you don't like that feedback. I don't have the professional skill level to say, here's what it should look like. If you do this, it will work. And I know that's a frustrating place to be, but you know, taking and saying, do something like screening, I can't tell you to go do that, and then you bring it back and it doesn't meet code. It won't. We've been through this exercise, but what I hear is a consistent sentiment, and it's a question of architecture, of what will the architecture look like to make it look like it belongs at the end of the day.
I can only tell you the world-class architect who's done this now twice works through this as best she can, and she has been very clear, and she said it here. I think she said it on at the concept plan. You can't make it not look like a garage. So it's really about making it look less like a garage in some way, and that's what we've been trying to do. Take the eye away from something else. We tried the art, that didn't work. We're trying to use the green so that we can meet the code. Take the eye away from the building. It softens it up. The green exists. It ties into everything else that was there. That's what the architect, that's what she does, and that's how she did it, right? She spent weeks with different ideas, different concepts, working through different things. So is it something we could do? But I'm not, and I want to be very clear in case anyone ever reads this or anyone ever watches this, for you to ever think we said we'll make it not look like a garage, because we've said consistently we don't think that's possible. We could try to diminish some of the things, we could try to change some things, but at the end of the day, it isn't an integrated structure and building, right? We can't keep the building, the paseo, and the structure and keep it all together. And to do it in an integrated piece would mean, particularly with a 25-story height, you would have a massive wall on Okeechobee. Right? So we've been trying to keep the themes there, to keep things open, to keep them from being a little bit different. And the architect has worked really hard on that. So if she could come up with some sort of a screening concept, we'll look at that. I can tell you, unless you say we're okay with 14 stories or 13 stories on the garage, because that's what the active use would require. And then we'd have to figure out what else to do. At least then that's something. But we're really trying to keep the garage the height it is and not go higher.
I have a follow-up, if I may, Mr. President.
Commissioner Shove.
And Mr. Seymour, I've said several times here, I am Kelly Shove, not Pelly Clark, who clearly is a world-class architect. But every Pelly Clark building I have looked at, I have not seen a parking garage. So it says to me that it can be done. Maybe it's the photo angle, maybe there's a lot of things. but it could be done
There
somewhere.
aren't garages. They're underground in some of them, or they don't design, they don't do a ton of garages. So most, like when you're in the downtown areas like in San Francisco or Chicago, you don't have the same garage concepts. You certainly can go underground where you don't have the water tables that we have. So you're not seeing them because they're not there. So it is not the same thing. You also have the buildings that they design. If I could go to 50 stories, I could probably do a podium. In fact, the first concept we had was to do a podium and then go thinner up to the top. But you can't do that. We're capped at 25 stories in your comp plan. So we had to design within that as well. So I just want to be careful that when you look at that stuff, the apples to apples exist. And that's why you're not seeing them. It's not because they can design better. It's because they don't exist there.
And see, so then it brings it to a very interesting place in that we're relying on the expertise of a world-class architect to design a world-class garage that doesn't design garages. So now that runs into that issue, but that's a design issue that we could argue all day long. I think the other point that I wanted to make is we sit and we talk about this concept plan and what we agreed to in the concept plan. And for me, there's a distinct difference between having the request, because the concept plan was a request from the developer saying, this is what I would like to put on to the plan. And then we gave an approval. No one on this dais sat and said, give us a building, give us a parking garage, give us a paseo. There was a concept presented to us, and we either agreed or gave direction to change. Again, from my point of view, I gave the direction to change. I understand you have to deal with this body and not just one commissioner. But I think that there's a distinct difference between saying, you all requested the paseo, you all requested. Our job is to approve and agree. If it's a concept that can be implemented, then that's up to development to decide. That's part of the partnership.
I didn't say requested. We put it in. There were parts, by the way, in the original designs, and Commissioner Schoaf talked about public spaces just now. I'm sorry, Commissioner Fox did. I'm looking at you. Commissioner Fox just talked about public spaces just now. It was something that was part of the concepts from day one. There was an RFP, there were all the pieces that go in, and so that was all part of it, and that was then presented. And if what mattered, what I'm saying is if what mattered a year plus ago was only the parking structure, don't care what happens to the paseo or the building, we could have done a completely different design a year and a half ago and not spent $1 million. So in this partnership, we're trying to get direction. And I apologize, I'm a little frustrated by this because I keep coming back and I feel like I'm never going to get this done. Never, because I don't know what it is you want. Are you okay with a 15-story parking structure if that's what it takes to put active use liner?
I understand you're frustrated because I'm frustrated from this side of the dais as well, because I think what everyone I've heard agreed to today is that we want to get a good, viable project going. But I certainly can't sit here and tell you 15 stories is going to do it. It's about how the context of everything on this site works together. And so I can't come up with that concept plan. So I know that's not the answer you're looking for. You're looking for us to say, yes, do this, and do this, and it's going to be okay. And I don't have that kind of direction.
I find it hard to say we're going to have a project that you all say you want when I don't know what the project's supposed to look like, and I have to keep coming back and guessing. I apologize, but like I don't know exactly what else we're supposed to do. So if anyone else has any ideas, I'd be happy to hear.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Seymour, I think that you've heard similar comments from each of the commissioners up here that we'd like a parking garage that doesn't necessarily look like a parking garage. That may be something that's not capable of even being produced by your architect. I don't know, but I think we've given you the direction. We want a structure that doesn't look like a parking garage, and I don't know how we can be any more clear than that. Mr. Roog?
Well, I was just going to offer some thoughts based on what I've heard from the body today, which is a lot of things related to the facade, making it more usable. I mean, some comments here on mobility, as well as perhaps some thoughts of how we work with staff. So in the spirit of continuing the progress, I don't know if you would like some of that feedback to be considered as direction in order to move this forward, or if there's another direction that you'd like to go. But I also know that Commissioner Lambert had her hand up as well, so I don't know if there's more that she would like to add.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. Just a few comments that I feel everybody's frustration with this. And as I look at this location and I think about the photo that was shown earlier where it's blank, it's nothing, it's people are doing wheelies on the site, like this is a unique location and we just want to get it right. And whether that is this direction coming from Mr. Rugg today, from some of their comments, or we have a work session where we discuss some of these a little bit more and we talk about all of these different options and what it looks like with or without the Paseo, and we have these discussions. I want to get it right because this is going to be here for the next 50 plus years.
So understand, this is a work I mean, if you're going to have a work session, let's have it. If you want to hire an architect yourselves, you can hire an architect yourselves, and we're happy to work with them as well. If you want us to work with staff, we've been working, but we also have, and by the way, I mean, it's pretty clear you're not approving this tonight. And I made also in that letter that Ms. Rothenberg mentioned a request for our extension under the lease. It's not guaranteed. You have to approve it. But you're giving us no choice at this point. So we need at least another 6 months under that lease. And I would ask that at the very least, if you're okay, Madam Attorney, to at least that vote happen tonight. So I don't have to come back here again just for that if that requires a vote. I don't think this was required, so I don't know. I didn't look at what that required.
Brian, it requires not only a vote, but an amendment to the lease, and it does have to come to the board to give to have an appropriate resolution drafted so that that extension can be granted through the lease amendment.
So your next meeting is in 2 weeks? Do you have a meeting in 2 weeks?
December 13th is the next scheduled one.
December 13th?
Yes.
So we have, then if
We
you don't
would
have a
have to set
special
a special
meeting,
meeting.
then we won't have a lease because we won't have the time. The year will have passed.
So,
Mr. Rugg.
if I may, I think what I'm hearing is we will work with you. There's a series of principles that I think the city have adopted as it relates to what we're looking for in the direction of where we want this building to go. In addition to, we can work on the extensions for the lease in order to give you the time that's needed in order to make the improvements necessary. I think the only thing we want is the same commitment to just work with the architect and with Charles in order to get the parking garage to where I think this body would like to see it and give us some time to work on it.
So Mr. Coen has worked and worked and worked, and he's continuing to work. He's committed to trying to make this work if we know what it is we need to do. So what I will promise is we will sit down with you, with Anna Maria and Rick, and I assume Nancy or Kimberly, because I'm not allowed to talk to anybody because this is now a lease issue. The Florida bar rules. I'm big on ethics. So we will do that. We will do that as quickly as possible. We will have to zoom in Kristen and Charles. I don't know what that comes to because I still am not quite sure what happens. I mean, we're talking about mobility, and there's a ton of mobility. So what else? I mean, I don't, so we'll work as best we can with, to try to make something happen so we don't have to end up frankly, in a lawsuit. Because that's the only other option at this point. So we will try because we don't want to do that either.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any other comments before we go to public comment? Okay, we will go now to public comment. Once I call your name, if you come up to the podium over here, actually both podiums, I think Mr. Seymour's going to sit. Carol Sher or Sherry or Chen? Okay, perfect. And the next, T. Welsh. T. Welsh. If you could come up each respectively to a podium. T. Welch. William Canfield. All right, Miss.
Hello.
Go ahead. If you
Good
could say your
afternoon,
name and
Commissioner.
address, please.
My name is Sherry Elias. I reside at 701 South Olive Avenue, downtown West Palm Beach. My husband and I attended the presentation that Brian gave last week, and it was a very well-received presentation. He was very precise, enthusiastic, very very complete in what he presented to us, and he did receive a complete ovation at the end of his presentation. The reason why we so enjoyed his presentation is because he gave us so much of what we wanted to see. That site is unsightly. They do wheelies there on the weekends. Besides the noise and the commotion that goes on, it is not someplace you want to live in an expensive apartment. Be frank, these apartments are very, very expensive. And I know in your hearts and your minds, you care about the livability of downtown West Palm Beach because you say it often. And it's in the description of downtown West Palm Beach, but the livability of it, the work, livability, and everything else. What we liked about his presentation is the building looked beautiful. And he considered the neighborhood. He didn't ask for an ordinance and by putting up a 30-story building where the ordinance was only for 25 stories. He didn't impede on the traffic, making himself his own area that would be really what I'm alluding to, as you all understand, there's another project that's going up that's going to be a complete eyesore for the entire neighborhood in the fact that it's gotten too tall. People voted not to have it that height, and it was just ignored. So therefore, it's really impeding on our lifestyle. We all pay dearly for these apartments, and it's going to be blocking so many people's views. And that was a big, big mistake on your all part, and something that we are very hurt about. Because we moved here after all that happened, and we heard the people really wrote letters and complained, 4,000, 5,000 signatures, and you just ignored it. We hope that this time you will not ignore a presentation of a building that is aesthetically pleasing. We think it's beautiful. We hope, and apparently he cares about the livability, and he cares about the neighbors and how it looks in our neighborhood. You know best as far as the garage. I can certainly bow to all that. And I know you care about our city and how it looks, because many of you probably live downtown. I mean, all of downtown West Palm is beautiful. All of West Palm is beautiful. But we can only speak for what we all need. We need something put there. And as soon as you can get it there, we would greatly appreciate it, because it is quite unsightly and it's dangerous with the youngsters, with the bikes and everything else. And plus it brings traffic of trucks and they leave debris, and it never really looks very clean. And that means a lot to us. So please consider working with him and giving us a beautiful building in our neighborhood. Thank you so much.
So I had mentioned Carol Chi or Chair. It wasn't her. It was Sherry Elias, right, ma'am? Your name is Sherry Elias? Okay. So I'm going to read Carol's comment into the record. I support the Coen Brothers development on the tent site. William Canfield. Okay, Mr. Canfield supports. Christopher Arlotta.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Approach the podium.
Is it okay if I take this off?
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, Christopher Arlotta, 600 South Dixie Highway. Actually, I was the guy who mentioned the economic impact at the meeting. And so my original comments were going to be, I really hope that you guys consider that when these massive structures and all the economic impact that comes to the town and the money, I really hope that you guys consider returning some of it to the people that sent it there, because the cost and to the impact to the city with commercial is not the same as residential. So I just hope that you guys take that into consideration when all this money starts flowing into the coffers, that you think to send it back to those of us that sent it there. The second thing, and I have to tell you, I'm a little, taken aback when I hear things from elected representatives of the people that you guys own that property, that it's 1/6 yours. I have to tell you, that sounds pretty arrogant. We own it. The people that send the money into this city, that work hard every day, we are the owners. You guys represent our interests. So I hope that you take that into consideration too, the next time you discuss who actually owns that real estate. And third, I have to tell you, I mean, it's not my money. If I were you, I'd leave town. A garage that doesn't look like a garage, I don't think I've ever heard anything so ridiculous in my life. Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it, and good luck to you. And tell Mr. Coen we support him, and we're sorry that he actually has to go through this.
Thank you. Michael Cuevas.
I wasn't going to speak, but...
I'm sorry? Okay. I'll read it into the record. I support a quality project by right meeting the CRA's guidelines. Cynthia Nally. I support Coen has fulfilled all requirements and produced a quality project. Time is money. T. Welsh. I support Coen Brothers development on the tent site. Do we have any comments from the portal?
I have a stack. We have several.
Okay. So you'll read them into the record?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Excuse me one moment. Mr. President, since there is such a large stack there, if they are similar, could we instruct that she read their name and maybe...
I think we definitely have to give the attribution to the person who has made the comment. I'm not sure, if, Madam City Attorney, would that be permissible if they're similar for the clerk to simply read the name?
Yes, we had that conversation earlier, but it would be appropriate. My understanding is most of them simply marked that they are either opposed or support.
Perfect.
And with their name and the understanding that they either supported or opposed should be sufficient unless there's something in writing to add to them.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk.
So again, just for clarity, I talked to the city attorney. I still would have to read the name and address into the record, just so you're... Okay, the first one's from Keisha Clemens Sallin, 5040 Ellery Terrace, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Keisha Hearn, 3511 Village Boulevard, apartment 404, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Joshua Horowitz, 4175 North Haverhill Road, apartment 909, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Zachary Zanvier, 4133 Winnipeg Way, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Oswaldo Jaron, 7110 Okeechobee Boulevard, apartment 6113, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Eric Jones, 407 Ontario Place, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Tina Kaiser, 5149 Palm Brook Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Amber Ledbury, 3121 Village Boulevard, apartment 107, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Laura Leva, 16304 Glenmore Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Dana Leslie, 9873 Baywinds Drive, apartment 5210, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Andrea Lempinski, 3791 Victoria Road, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Mary Lutis, 2796 Livingston Lane, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Kevin Magnaflores, 2600 North Military Trail, apartment 1206, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Eligio, I'm killing this name, Marquevry, 6648 Duval Avenue, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Keisha Manscott, 8975 Okeechobee Boulevard, apartment 204, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Matthew McKegney, 1441 Brandywine Road, apartment 800, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Thomas Menzel, 2460 Victoria Point, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Dan Matrovic, 4110 Bear Lakes Court, apartment 306, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Andrea Molinari, 4427 Lake Lucerne Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Bruce Moody, 1310 Bear Island Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Annette Mascarella, 2211 Vero Beach Lane, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Marty Nicely, 7925 9 River Road, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Roland Phillips, 2880 North Bight, B-I-G-H-T, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Margaret Price, 2095 Tigris Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Chad Reeves, 4200 Community Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Francis Rowley, 4215 Crozet Court, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Latanya Russell, 6310 63rd Way, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Nicholas Samuels, 3133 Kingston Court, Unit 5A, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Mark Scott, 5141 Willow Pond Road West, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Susan Schelling, 9769 Bowline Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Russell Smith, 2901 Caffeya Way, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Lawrence Stoddard, 6645 66 Way, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Mary Albanese, 3525 Village Boulevard, apartment 205, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Arlene Cheese Nelson, 3790 North Jog Road, apartment 103, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Harvey Kaspari, 9066 Bay Harbor Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Alexandre, 4242 Lake Tahoe Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Lashana Carter, 4250 Bell Lakes Court, apartment 303, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Angelo Achenor, 3800 North Jog Road, apartment 101, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Jacqueline Carr, 2101 Ware Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Kai Anderson Cloud, 4342 Lake Tahoe Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Michelle Antico, 1014 Green Pine Boulevard, apartment C1, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Catherine Carey, 1967 Brandywine Road, apartment 203, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Violet Baptiste, 136 Rowley Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Enid Caballero Garcia, 505 Spencer Drive, apartment 301, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Edgar Belmonte Silvera, 870 Blue Ridge Circle, number 870, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Francis Block, 3380 Commodore Court, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Margaret Butler, 587 Green Springs Place, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Tracy Bargano, 3511 Village Boulevard, apartment 103, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Jubal Burton, 1116 Green Pine Boulevard, apartment F2, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Eleanor Braitman, 9126 Bay Point Circle, Lot 40, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Kenneth Bricks, 7630 Red River Road, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Michael Daly, 1110 Green Pine Boulevard, Apartment C1, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Natalia Davis, 6107. She didn't give the rest of the street. West Palm Beach. I oppose. Peter Davis, 7847 Pine Island Way, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Elaine Dorn, 2337 Cypress Tree Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Shirley Edme, 1967 Brandywine Road, Apartment 102, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Sandra Eisman, 2533 Livingston Lane, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Sheila Elliott, 3160 El Camino Real, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Melissa Everett, 4570 Portofino Way, Apartment 301, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Denise Bertoline, 4079 Lake Tahoe Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Terrence Hackett, 1657 Brandywine Road, Apartment 7316, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Suzanne Firestone, 7121 Grassy Bay Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Sherry Hack, 5289 Ashley River Road, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Richard Gabb, 7748 Nile River Road, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Everett Guthrie, 5161 Ellery Terrace, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Antoine Glover, 4670 Portofino Way, Apartment 309, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Michelle Gary, 4052 North San Andros, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Cassandra Kissendanner, 1967 Brandywine Road, Apartment 305, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Jillian Gilbert, 4170 Bear Lakes Court, Apartment 308, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Valerie Williams Selver, 1401 Village Boulevard, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Tony Williams, 5297 Victoria Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Bridget Wester, 4179 North Haverhill Road, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Kristen Watson, 4345 Chalmers Lane, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Sarah Waterbury, 6775 Duval Avenue, West Palm Beach. I oppose. Mariah Renee Wallace Allicott, 1401 Village Boulevard, Apartment 321, West Palm Beach. I oppose. James Trammell, 4822 Victoria Circle, West Palm Beach. I oppose. And Mary Stewart, 6450 Sparrowhawk Drive, West Palm Beach. I oppose. That's the last one.
Thank you, Ms. Carson. I know that that was not an easy task, and I appreciate you doing that. Commissioner Lambert.
I just would like to clarify that you were reading, that you weren't shortening those. That's exactly what they said. They didn't put anything else. And so just clarification for our city attorney, I looked at the agenda item again. When they're writing in they oppose, they're not opposing the entire project. They're just opposing the discussion on the garage, since that's what is on today's agenda.
I really won't be able to answer what was in their mind when they submitted their card that they opposed, but what is on your agenda is the consideration of the concept plan.
So, Commissioner, I can promise you this, we're going to reach out to those folks, and if the clerk will provide the letters, I mean, I'd probably have to make a public records request formally, but if I don't, I'd appreciate it. I just did. City Attorney said I just did. So we would like a copy of those as quickly as possible. We will be reaching out to those folks. I actually think that I know exactly what this is going on, but we would like to talk to those folks about whether they really oppose, and if so, what they oppose, as opposed to all the folks who came here. I mean, remember, this is the fourth or fifth time we've been here with not a single opposition. So it's a little surprising this last minute comes out, but we'll find out.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. And I just wanted to just state something before I ask my colleagues if they have any more questions or go to Mr. Rugg. I heard you say something, and as an attorney to an attorney, I just wanted to say that I know you're frustrated, but mentioning the prospect of litigation when you're also saying at the same time that you want to work with us is certainly not going to move this project forward in a way that in the spirit of compromise or in the spirit of us all getting behind this project.
I understand that, but I want to be clear. If we didn't want to work together, the lawsuit would have been filed. The point being, we don't want to go there. What I'm saying is, if I have to, I don't know how to answer the question of what it should look like, and I'm worried we're going to not be able to truly do that. Now, we're going to try, because we don't, that the only other option is to fight, and we don't want to fight. And that's why we showed up tonight in the first place. So I wasn't doing it in the sense of a threat as much as just trying to explain to you, we really want to try to do this. I don't know how long we can do it. I'm trying. That's why I want to get that direction as much as possible, and I will work with Mr. Rugg, and obviously he can talk to you all as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rugg.
I was just going to mention, as it relates to a lot of people in the crowd, a lot of them were here for a prior agenda item, which I do want to address as well, Mr. Chair, but I just wanted to clarify, based on the last comment.
Sure. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. So I was wondering if the city attorney could just clarify what our options are for the next step tonight.
Tonight, you have before you a resolution that you will either vote to approve or to deny, and give any additional direction that you want to give to the developer as they move forward based on what your motion is.
Mr. Rugg.
I was just going to offer additional clarity on it, that the direction that I've heard is that you have given feedback. I think we also have a lot of other documents in the city that rely on a variety of principles that when working with Mr. Coen and his team, city staff, along with CRA staff, can work on refining the project, and namely the parking garage, to bring back a concept plan in a very short amount of time that this board can consider that's more in line with, I think, the direction that you've given today.
Okay, Madam City Attorney, do we need to proceed with a vote on the substantive issue? And if we do, what would that result in if it was a down vote? Would you still be able to?
If it's a down vote, the concept plan that was proposed, the living green walls, would be off the table as proposed.
Would staff still be able to negotiate, in a more acceptable proposal?
Absolutely.
Any commissioners have any comments? And if not, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to deny resolution number 21-63 to allow time for the applicant to refine the concept plan and work with staff and come back at a later date.
Thank you. There is a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Any more discussion? Discussion. Commissioner Lambert.
Based on the commissioner's comments earlier, I expect that this will go through as a down vote. So I did want to say something to the residents who are here to speak up about this. We most definitely want to have something developed here, and discussion about the building itself was not had at all, because I think we're all in agreement that that is beautiful and it is something what we'd like to see here. And to the comment of the woman who said she cares about the livability of West Palm Beach, I can guarantee you I do, as well as I know my colleagues do as well, and that's what we'd like to get to with the garage. And so just thank you all so much for coming, and I am hopeful that we can work together so that we don't have to start over, that we can find some way to create this wonderful public-private partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other discussion? There's no additional discussion. We'll go to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. And I think we have reached the conclusion of the agenda. Mr. Rugg, do you have anything additional?
So I did want to make a mention that we have several folks here from the neighborhood relative to item 7.1, the One Narrative Strategic Plan, and I do want to at least acknowledge them, and I don't know if any of them had maybe filed cards to make some comments, but I think they were out in here in solidarity to support. I know my colleague here, Eric Kelly, is also in the audience. Eric, do you mind just coming up to the podium for a quick, if that's okay, Mr. Chair?
That's okay, but we're not going to entertain a number of comments. So if there's one person that you would like to make a comment, because we're running out of time with
understood.
this meeting, and there were no cards put in.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I know Mr. Kelly is here. He was part of the team, as I acknowledged, that helped put together that scope. So I think it's just acknowledging him and a lot of members from the community, including folks from the Roosevelt High School Alumni Association that are here in support of the One Narrative project. So Eric, if, as the chair said, just maybe real brief comments.
Yeah, go ahead if you'd like to keep your comments brief, please.
Would it be okay if everyone who came to support just stand for a moment?
That's fine.
Stand for a moment. And, well, are they coming out? Ms. Perry, are they coming in? Okay. There was a mix-up in the time. They thought it was going to be at 4 o'clock, so everyone came for the 4 o'clock. If we could just simply do this, Mr. Chair, for those of you who are here now that we are here and you know that that it passed, could we just say thank you on 3? 1, 2, 3? And those are our comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just wanted to give a special shout out. I see some very familiar faces in the audience. Mr. Holland, who's the Pleasant City Neighborhood Association president, Miss Kathy Gardner, Miss Nellie Cooper, the presidents of the Coleman Park Neighborhood Association, Miss Annie Ruth Nelson back there, Roosevelt Estates, Craig Glover from RISE, and a lot of really great partners that are involved in this project. So excited. You'll have to rewind and see the conversation on this, but I think it's going to be a really great thing. So happy to have you all as partners in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schoaf. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, then without objection, we'll move to adjourn this meeting at 4:47 p.m. and we will reconvene at 5 p.m. as the City Commission.